I was told to do what an exec told me, in a precast concrete plant. A very long story, but I hope worth the read. Some background. First, I worked for a precast concrete company as a job in between high school and college. The job sucked, but it paid well. We made a lot of the massive storm culverts and tunnel pieces that are dropped in place during construction instead of being made where they are. To put this in perspective, our largest casting form could handle pieces 40 feet x 30. Absolutely massive pieces. After a few weeks of working for this company, I was trained to run the industrial concrete mixer. And did this every day. This mixer was 3 stories tall. Mixed up to 4.5 cubic yards of concrete at a time. And was the most beat-up machine in the entire plant. Which was saying something. It ran 6 days a week. 2 shifts a day. And was never maintained because the company couldn't get techs to come out on Sunday. Its only day not running. And didn't want to lose a work shift to get it maintained. The only good thing about it was that all the materials were weighed and fed in automatically. All it took was a button to start the process. The most common problem was the bottom release door not sealing correctly. It would be just barely cracked, allowing all the water to run out of it, resulting in an unusable chunky mess that would need to be dumped in a scrap hole instead of being used. If this happened, the mess needed to be dumped out of the mixer quickly before it could partially harden inside the mixer. This only happened once that I was there, and it took an entire shift to chisel the stuff out. We put a mark into the sliding door to show where it should be versus where it would be when it didn't seal. The process worked like this. A cage of rebar and anchor points was constructed on a base around a core, and a form bolted around it. The QA guy signed off, and the form was then filled with concrete and left to cure. The curing time largely depends on the ambient temperature. The hotter it is, the faster it cures, and vice versa. Once the piece has cured enough to be lifted, the form is stripped and the piece lifted by crane off the core. Repeat until you have as many pieces ordered. Another thing to note is hard hat colors. They were color-coded according to your role. Blue are plant supervisors, green QA, red the foreman, etc. For the normal workers, there was a choice of 2 colors. Yellow for people who don't know what they are doing, typically new or dumb people, and gray for those that do. This was about 5 months into my time with them, and I had just got a gray one, maybe 2 moths before. Onto the story. Our plant was starting to producing pieces at a substantially slower rate than the other plant owned by the company. We were working 10 to 12-hour days every day to try and make up the difference. Typically, multiple pieces were made per form. Per day, 2 to 4. We were only managing 1 and maybe 2 per form per day. To figure out the reason for this, the owner's plan was to send an exec from the main office to observe and time every section of the process in our plant. This in itself was silly. Remember how I said the speed concrete cures is based on temperature? Our plant was in an unheated warehouse in a state bordering Canada. In the winter. The other plant was in Florida. Can you guess why production was a bit slower in our plant? In any case, during the shift meeting before the exec got there, our foreman's exact words were, "Do what he tells you. Otherwise stay the away from him." Wonderful. The shift proceeds as normal. Building cages and forms get bolted. Maybe 6 hours into the shift, I climb up on top of the mixer to the platform, and I am greeted by the exec in the shiniest white hard hat I have ever seen, and office attire complete with black dress shoes. In an concrete plant. Lol. He looked bored out of his mind. He asked me something to the effect of if I was looking forwards to the end of the shift in 2 hours. I told him that with no problems we might get to leave in 4 hours. He got the most defeated look on his face and mumbled something that I didn't catch. I went through the pre-checks on the mixer and found the bottom door was once again not closing properly. I yelled down to the plant supervisor that the door wasn't sealing again and that the machine would be down until I got it to seal. Normally by chipping the concrete left by the previous shift after using the mixer away from the opening. The plant supervisor yelled back a few choice expletives directed at the mixer and stormed into his office. The exec had a look and said he thought the door looked fine. I told him that it did this a lot and that it wasn't sealed. Pointed out the mark to him. And went to get the tool. I bribed a fabricator with energy drinks to make me to chip away the concrete. A braking bar welded onto a rebar shaft that I kept under the mixer itself. No more hunting down a air gun and going through confined space lock and tag outs. Just stand on top and poke at the concrete until the door moves freely. Upon coming back with the tool, the exec told me that the seal was fine and to run it. I pointed out the same things about the door nor sealing regularly. I asked if they were sure. They replied in the affirmative. I started up the mixer. The mixer regularly threw a bunch of silica up into the air. With the water draining out the bottom, this was going to get extra dusty. I offered them an extra mask that I had and they replied that they would be fine. Well, it's not my lungs. At the same time I noticed the plant's heavy equipment guy walking into the building. And got his attention and made the hand gesture for the front loader. I got a WTF look from them and they mouthed why. I pointed down at the mixer. Repeated the gesture and they threw up their hands and turned around. The load went into the mixer. Water started draining out the bottom. Dust goes everywhere. Go figure. The plant supervisor comes out of the office, I assume after seeing the giant cloud on the cameras. Runs over. And says something like, "Op, what the are you doing?" Quote. The mixer is quite loud with concrete in it. I got the general gist though. I just pointed to the exec who was now covered in dust and staring at the water pouring out the bottom of the mixer. Never said a word. The plant supervisor's head swiveled and he just crooked a finger at the exec. The exec climbed down. They exited the building with the plant supervisor leading the fallout. The front loader was able to get to the mixer before the mess was able to partially cure inside it. So the cleanup was as easy as dumping it into the bucket and then dumping that in the scrap hole. And spraying out the mixer. We continued the shift after I chipped the concrete away from the door and got it closing properly. Again, not too much time wasted. Maybe an hour. The foreman asked what happened later in the shift and didn't stop laughing for the rest of it. The plant supervisor talked to me afterwards. Asked what happened. And told me he didn't blame me for that dumb's mistakes, since he had said to do what the exec said. I never saw the exec again and the plant supervisor never said what happened in the parking lot. I can only assume that the most this produced was angry phone calls. And a lot of concrete wasted. I left about 3 months later, but I never heard anything else about slow production times from the main office. TLDR. The exec came out to observe a precast concrete plant and ended up telling me to press a button on an industrial cement mixer despite my warnings. Ending in a lot of concrete being dumped and the exec leaving. The lack of maintenance sounds very familiar to me. I drive ready-mix trucks. If we can keep it running until the next holiday, all is good. We have 2 slots of 2 weeks per year that the plant closes. So maintenance to the plant and trucks happens then or until it fails catastrophically. And we're shut down by it. Rip that exec's lungs. Silicosis as real folks. I visited a precast yesterday. I do not envy people working there. Was worth the read. Good story. Is 4.5 cubic yard capacity correct? That seems kinda small for a machine 3 stories tall. How hard would it be for the exec to just observe and report back? It's slower because it takes longer to cure. And they're hindered due inability to perform properly maintenance. Per our policies. I hate yes men. That probably would have been a perfect time to tell the exec that the machine badly needed a day or 2 down for proper maintenance, as that was a common occurrence. Nice story. Unfortunately, this kind of thing is much more frequent than one would imagine. I still have no idea why the idea of proactive maintenance is such a hard concept to get management to understand. Kudos MC, a good story, and I learned how precast is made. Lack of maintenance is one of the biggest problems with any plant. People in charge don't seem to understand why you can't run machinery the 24th of July 365. Explaining to them that you need to have something turned off to maintain it for an hour at least once a week brings confusion to them because apparently they'd much rather machine to explode, bringing all production to a halt for days or weeks at a time. Good story. I'm imagining his nice white hat wasn't so shiny afterwards. Hey Mr. Exec. You know, if you bought us a new one of this big-ass machine, I wouldn't have to chip away all this crap from the door and it'd save us 15 to 20 minutes each load. Or buy us a new door for it. Quote. I just pointed to the exec who was now covered in dust and staring at the water pouring out the bottom of the mixer. Never said a word. These are the moments we live for. Wish you could got that on camera. If they had shut down productions for 1 day of maintenance, it would overall increase production and less waste. It ran 6 days a week, 2 shifts a day, and was never maintained because the company couldn't get techs to come out on Sunday. Its only day not running, and didn't want to lose a work shift to get it maintained. If this happened, the mess needed to be dumped out of the mixer quickly before it could partially harden inside the mixer. This only happened once that I was there, and it took an entire shift to chisel the stuff out. Management. Everybody. I love that you can wear a yellow hard hat to signal that you don't know what you're doing. I might try that. The plant supervisor talked to me afterwards, asked what happened, and told me he didn't blame me for that dumb's mistakes, since he had said to do what the exec said. Well, gotta give him credit for owning that one. I've seen this same sort of crap many times. We don't have enough time to shut down for maintenance. Can't you just do a quickie? Sure. But 2 to 3 months of that you're going to be seeing regular breakdowns that cost far more time than just letting us have a PM day. The amount of downtime I can prevent in 4 hours of PM work easily pays for itself. A good approach to that is to ask, specifically, 3 times, "Are you sure you want me to do that? Are you willing to put it in writing?" Single quote. That won't stop the stupidest of suits, but it will stop quite a few. Random question. Doesn't something also go wrong if it gets too hot curing? Thinking I read they had to cool the curing concrete on the Hoover Dam and other massive pours.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Hadak-Ura is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.